So as I'm in the middle of, or at the beginning of spring break, I'm working on week 6, which will be content also after spring break. But as I work on week 6, and you're wondering, Rio, what are you talking about? There's no week 6 here. It's because I'm working on it. And as I'm working on it, I'm considering what I've said before, and what my goal is every time we do an attendance, we focus something on the project. So in this case, I'm going to focus on starting our styling, but I just want to say that in order for you to do this, and I've set the project module up this way, is that you do have to complete the phase 1, right? So we're moving into phase 2 now, where we're actually going to style. So it's not due until week 7, but I started on week 6 to give you that, here's where we're heading. Here's the things you're going to want to consider and maybe get started. But the challenge will be at this point, right? Because this is going to be very close to when this is due. But I thought, well, there's things I could do. But for now, I'm just going to do a video to show you how the styling, the requirements are laid out. Okay? So in this case, as you've seen before, here's the link to the markdown instruction, and I have it up here, and you can view it starting pretty much anytime. I think week 4 is the requirement to get through. Okay, so I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to show you some examples based on my own project, because and actually, here's where I want to start with. Like this, the purpose of now starting to style is like your goal isn't perfection. It's to demonstrate what you've learned, build something that you're proud of, and enjoy the creative process. And this is where I really, man, I could spend so much more time, but I had to kind of stop myself and go, okay, we're good enough to show where we're at. Because the sample site I showed for the phase 1 was actually because I hadn't located my not old, but my previous example. So I found my old one and I brought it up to date. Anyway, the point here is that, you know, this is really this is generally the part that most people more enjoy than phase 1. Phase 1's like content structure, maybe, doing, not maybe, but doing some images. All right, so do this. You got to fix any issues you had with part 1. If you don't fix those issues, they will continue to hurt your grade in part 2. So if I say you got to fix this, now I may just give you general feedback, but if I say specifically you got to fix it, then you need to fix it before you start on P2, phase 2. Okay, and that's why I was showing it. Oh, I know I've already gone back, but that's why I was showing it, is that you have to have submitted your phase 1 to start on your phase 2. But in this case, right, you just copy your ending code from your phase 1 and you create a new one called create a new folder, phase 2. Now I'm going to bring up and I think I have several things open here, but I'm just going to show you based on the way I have mine organized and the way you need to have yours. Now I actually have in my VS Code my project opened. Oh, I had a validation error and I fixed it, which, by the way, good point. You need to make sure your CSS and HTML validates. You'll see me talk about that in a minute. But in this case, in that project folder, in your private repo, this is the key, right? In your private repo, then you take whatever you had for phase 1, you create a new folder, place all that content in there. And again, we're still using the images folder. That way you can, as you work through these phases, not have to repeat these images. Okay? Okay, so once you do that, then you're going to, and this is where I've broken out this number 2. So that was 1. So 2 is just, this is a major heading, right? So in this case, it's 65 points. But before we get into the detail of what you need to do, I'm actually giving you some general guidelines, right? So we're going to begin styling our site using only CSS introduced in 1 through 13, because that's what we've covered. You may have covered by this point a little more, but in this case, I want you to only focus on those. right? And I repeat that here, right? So your styling should demonstrate a solid understanding of the cascade and specificity, right? Of understanding how to apply CSS, how the cascade works. When I want something, that both leans into the cascade but is specific to one thing I'm trying to do, understand how to do that. That it's still semantic structure. Now you can make semantic changes based on what you're about to do. You still need to make sure it's valid. And again, the thing you need to make sure there's no title. And I'll show you a way I handled putting the headings in there so they wouldn't be. And minimal reliance on divs. Matter of fact, I would say only a couple. I think I say this down here, right? More than a few, and you get points removed because now we have better skills and better things we can use besides div. And divitis is a thing. Dave talked about this. So clean, organized CSS that follows best practices that we've been learning. Now, no grid, no flex box, no media queries, or content after chapter 13. Don't use any CSS frameworks or libraries, overuse of divs, right? Points will be removed, right? So now that you have those general guidelines, here's now the specifics of what you need to do and the points associated with them and how I want you to move through this project. So first, set up your base styles, right? So it can either be applied to the body or the HTML. You set a default family with a fallback. So we learned about this idea of the fallback, right? So which fonts, if for some reason let's say, you don't have to use Google Fonts, but if you do, even if you don't, is a way to fall back because not all computers have those fonts that you may be referencing. So you want to make sure your site will render no matter who's looking at it or to the best of your ability. Add line height, background color, and text color, right? So these are generally at the top of your page. And then once you draft those, then you say first attempt at your base styles. And I want you to move through this first part in the order. And then at the end, I'll give you a chance to refine, because that pretty much is the process that we're doing, which is we kind of set up our base, what we want for our design, and then we refine it. Okay, so then you set up page layout and containers, right? So in this case, right, for your header, your nav, and your sections, right, especially for the nav, right, inline block, I use floats for both images and some things I'll show you, and then or positioning, right? So use these in these different sections to create some kind of layout for now. Right, create a horizontal nav, that's what this is, using inline block or float methods, and apply visual spacing using margins and padding. So before I go much further, and by the way, again, first commit at this one, I'll just show you the first, here's my site, right, that I've created. And this is all about writing prompts, the use of AI in education. The balance of brains and bots was something chat helped me come up with. So you can see I have a nav here, right? You can see that. I have my footer is actually, in this case, fixed to the bottom, right? I do have a sticky option, which I'll talk about that in a minute. Right? And then I do have an absolute. So in this case, what I've done, and I'm not showing you the CSS, but you can see I've applied classes to these things to then generate, right, that create that visual effect. So a sticky note here that sticks as you scroll. Okay? And then the use of floats, which is nice in this case to give you that idea of floating your text and your images together. Right, and different ways to styles, which we'll get in a minute. Now, this is what I just showed you was some of these examples, right? But just you want to create some kind of layout, and then in the containers, have some kind of way you want your site to look as far as its style layout. Okay, so now, once you do that, now you're going to start into your content styling, right? So this is okay, figure out your base styles, figure out your layout and containers. And now let's actually talk about content styling, because different from what's in here, these are my base styles. Now I'm looking at specific things that, oh yeah, must have increased it. Probably not a bad idea. style at least one table and one list creatively. Now this is really fun to do. So I ended up just putting my rule sets on my table for that, and then I ended up creating some individual lists I'll show you in a minute. But you definitely want to use columns, right? So this is, and I use columns several places. Was it here? I think it was actually on another page I ended up using. Was it here? You know, you always remember, it's like, where did I put that? It wasn't here. It must have been on ethics. Oh well, I'll find it in a minute. Where I put actual columns, which was fun to actually have that work the way I wanted. I'll have to go back and find that in a minute. So, so this is your content, the beginning of your content styling. Okay, so one table, and I kind of zim by that, but I do have definitely my tables here rendering what. Matter of fact, I'm going to pause and find that column one. Okay, so I realized what I had done is I had kind of at the last minute put in an image, and I realized that my style for my image, the way I wanted it to float, was actually breaking my column. So that's where I get to go back and refine, right? Refine that concept of how to make both maybe column and images work together. So that is just kind of the process. And by the way, and I didn't show this earlier, but in order to keep my semantic organization, I ended up setting up some, in this case I'm going to hit inspect here to show you, low visibility text that I know I'm going to remove later when we learn how to hide those things, because we didn't learn that in 1 through 13. So anyway, coming back here. All right, so now you know your typography and links, right? So first, now we've done some content styling, and now we're still doing some content styling, but now specifically, right, on, and this may feel like, well, wait a minute, we already did the base fonts. So these are where you're going to find where you want to consistently style things throughout your project with a similar base font family, right? Or then lean into this where you do maybe a different line height and text alignment. And H1 through H4, definitely it would be a way to say, everywhere I have a H1, so like for me, right, so anywhere, because my H1, which is typically kind of your very top of your page, right, so in that case I would have those styled a particular way. You can see I use some line spacing there, letter spacing to do that. And then style all your A links with a consistent, you know, hover, focus, and visit. And I will have covered DevTools, how to make sure so how to look at DevTools to find some of these things, right? And the colors and or underlines to support usability. Now you can see, for me, of course, in my header, in my nav, I've done one type of styling because that styling is specific to my nav. But then in the body, I've used something different, right? But it's about, in my nav, it would make sense that I would do something different inside of there, because that is a different styling I'm creating versus in my regular page. Okay. All right, so now in this case, and I almost did it for some of this other, but I decided only to start dropping this requirement here. But let me finish this up. Apply styles using inheritance and class selectors. Like, you know, don't use inline and or IDs really. And if you are going to use IDs, note why you're using them. Like, am I using, because typically when you do an ID for styling, it's like that's the only place that applies, because your IDs only exist in one specific text, what we call, well, there's different ways to talk about it, but in other words, typically you want to use inheritance and class selectors here. So you do want to add something in your README file, right, about your typography enhancements here. Now, all your links and typography, for some reason, hard to come out, must be visually and consistent across all your home pages and content. And where it needs to be different, you can note that, right? So here's your first attempt at that. Now, here's where it gets, you know, again, depending on what you find. I find all of this to be fun and kind of not kind of, but creative. But, you know, decorative or positioning enhancements. Here's 10 points for this one. And you need to use, use of position, absolute, sticky, or fixed, and at least 3 interactive or visual elements. Now you can put them throughout the site, but part of why I'm having you do some of this documentation is so you can tell me where they're at. So when I need to specifically go find them, I will be able to do that, because sometimes I search and I'm just not jumping out at me. So you're basically telling me, here's how I did it, here's where I applied it. And the same is true here in the positioning and decorative. And you already saw mine, but I'll point them out specifically. But again, here, give me a section in your README file about where you put these so it's easier for me to find. Now, I ended up having this absolute section, right? So I have a header, a class for absolute badge. I used the sticky for here, right? Nice. So you can see in this case, I had my sticky note, and then I use for my footer, right? If I hit inspect here, you can see I have a fixed footer. Okay. Now, again, first attempt at these things because you're still going to refine them. Now, I'm going to give you, I'll talk about this refining process in a minute, but at this point, you're also going to, on your site.html, is choose a color palette. If you haven't already done this, like you can use coolers. We saw that in the course. Do make sure you do some contrast checking on them. And you wanted to visually, and I'll show you how I did this in mine. So if I go to the bottom and I hit my sitemap, then in my sitemap I'll hit inspect here to say I ended up using a section, but inside those sections I ended up using a paragraph, and then in those paragraphs I ended up styling them with the actual box, color box. Now this is where I'm combining two classes together to create that effect. So I have color box is that consistent box styling across all of them, and then I applied the specific primary dark and so on to show that. I do need to add my sitemap as we grow in pages. That becomes more important, but it just needs to be there. Okay. So figure out a way to do that. Somehow note, right? You don't actually have to use these words, but something that shows the concept of, your color palette. And then do the commit. I actually need to fix these to come down to the next line. All right, so now that you've kind of made your first pass around, now we're going to actually do some refining, because we know at this point part of this project is really saying, okay, I kind of have an idea, and now I want to be more specific in my styling. I want to refine them a little more, because sometimes when you change one thing, right, kind of like what I just showed where I added an image but I forgot to go back and check, oh yeah, that's right, it actually ended up, and I wouldn't want to have to go back and figure out why did it break my columns, because I knew I needed to have them. So I'd have to look at my styling and the way I lay my images to have them float to make sure I'm not breaking that. Okay? And that will be where float and the columns are having possibly some kind of conflict. But more than anything, what you're doing here, each time you finish a section or styling task, here's your example, like maybe style, and these need to be very specific, because what I will look at when I grade this work is, did you do these commits, right? And then you're refining. So if I see like a huge amount of change in one commit, that's not the idea, because I want to see that you've actually, because this part of this is also learning how to do good commits, right? So these are just examples to do that, but you want to do clear, descriptive, right? Now, and here's the thing, commit frequently. Right, because the more commits you do, it shows that you're conscious about the styling, that you're doing, and it's okay to change anything you've done above, right? But I would expect to see, at least, just anyway, the idea is just, I'm actually looking at your process here, right? So clear, descriptive commit messages show progress and professionalism, right? Add inline comments for key sections for your design choices. So I did this. I ended up putting comments in my CSS, right? So for my nav, for when I created, like I think I ended up creating, in my start section, I ended up creating some stylings just for craft. So I broke these down into craft list, right? So I have some styling classes that are just specific for them. So then I would have put some comments about what those following rule sets are. What are they doing specifically in my content? Okay, so validate your CSS HTML. Include clear and consistent typography and links for all pages. This is a little bit of a repeat here. Provide your commit history for your phase 2 project, your P2, and then ask for feedback early, okay? Then reach out to myself or Zach if you need help. And again, here's the idea, right? Is to demonstrate what you've learned. Build something that you're proud of and enjoy the creative process. All right, hope this gives you an idea about what the phase 2 of our project is. I hope you reach out for help when you need it, and I hope you have fun with it, because I know I sure did. I had to stop myself because I could have worked on it for more hours. And I think that could happen to many of us as we're styling things and really seeing how well we're translating these concepts into actually building something that, yeah, may not be perfect, doesn't have to be perfect, but it's something that I had fun with and I thought demonstrates a good skill level for understanding CSS. Okay, talk to you later.